Welcome. I'm Dr. Liz, an entrepreneur, speaker, podcaster, mom, and wife. This podcast is about hypnosis, but also about all kinds of ways to help you live your fullest life, to heal, transform, to play the long game and go after the joy. You can see more about me at drlizhypnosis.com. Hop over there to get a free hypnosis file to decrease fear and anxiety, or one to increase emotional stability. They're there just for you. I hope you enjoy the podcast as much as I do. Peace. Good morning, everyone. Dr. Liz here. Today's guest is Lynsi Eastburn. She was on the podcast back in 2017, both her and then her husband in another episode. They're both hypnotherapists, and I am so happy to have her back. We have stayed in touch since then, and I think about her and her husband all the time, actually. So when I heard that she had published a new edition of one of her books, I was like, oh my gosh, yes, please come on the podcast. This book is called Waiting in the Wings, Introducing the Pink Starlights. The Pink Starlights are referring to a spiritual cohort of babies that are coming through. So Lynsi is a fertility specialist. She really developed one of the first programs ever to be able to do hypnosis for fertility when someone's struggling to get pregnant, and has worked in that area for a long, long time. She's very intuitive and spiritual and really sees auras and babies around people. She doesn't just keep the faith that a baby's coming through for someone she's working with. She can see them. So her new book is quite fascinating. She goes more into that process, what the purposes of the pink starlights, why are they coming through to the planet now, and all the different ways that this has become revealed to her by them. Our interview has some tributaries to it. So we have the main theme of the pink starlights for sure, but the tributaries include motherhood and fertility and navigating the balance between the masculine and the feminine, not in terms of gender, but in a spiritual archetypal sense. So it's quite a fun conversation. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Peace. Hi, Lynsi. Welcome to the Hypnotize Me podcast.
Hi, Liz. Thanks for having me here today.
Absolutely. I was so excited to see your name come across my desk again, because I'd had you on years ago on the podcast, and it was such an impactful interview. I know for me and for my listeners as well that I heard from. So super excited to have you back on.
Yeah, that's great. I really am so excited to be here. We had such a great time with those. I think I've been on a couple of times and we've had some great talks.
Yes, yes. So today's topic is about the pink starlights, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And this is a book. When was this book originally published?
Let's see. It was originally published right at the beginning, was it, of, gosh, the days just kind of, or the years blur now. I think it was right at the beginning of 2020. No,
Okay.
2021, right at the end of 2020, beginning of 2021. And I just did a second edition just a few months ago.
Okay. That's pretty short for second edition. Had a lot changed?
Not a ton. I did have a new foreword by Dr. Maribel Verdialis of CNY Fertility. That was pretty important because she was really able to tie in from the medical standpoint, the spirit babies, the pink starlights, and, actual IVF, Western medicine treatment. Plus she's also a holistic doctor. So there were a few other things, but that I think was really important. I talk a lot about being bossed around by the pink starlights, or that they're, this is about them, not about me. So I think that was part of why they wanted to have this second edition happening.
Got it. Let's jump into who these pink starlight babies are.
Yeah. So I have been working with hypnofertility and spirit babies for a long, long time. And originally, and this, people started coming to me to ask for help to see if I could help them get pregnant with hypnosis. And these would be in many cases, women who'd be given a less than 1% chance of getting pregnant, and then also people who needed help, for example, with needle phobias, which, hypnosis is really helpful for,
Mm-hmm.
and that you can't be doing IVF if you have any issues with needles. The big thing was, though, that these women came to me saying, I just know there's a baby there. And I always said, yeah, I believe you. And
Mm-hmm.
I've said I would take a woman's awareness and knowledge over anything else when it comes to getting pregnant. I don't buy into a lot of the things, age and whatnot that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
That knowing is so important. So all of these babies started showing up one way or another with the hypnosis, and this evolved. I ended up creating a program because nobody was doing this specifically.
Yeah, they weren't.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's not to say people hadn't used hypnosis to help with fertility, but no one was specializing in it. It wasn't a thing back,
Right.
around 2000 when I started doing the actual hypnosis part of this.
Yeah, they would use hypnosis for birth, like hypno babies, hypnobirthing, that type
Right.
of thing. But yeah, I don't have any kind of awareness that they were using hypnosis for fertility.
Right. No, I mean, someone who's a hypnotist, if something comes into your office and someone asks about it, you should be able to work with it. But there was no program at all. There was no training. And so I ended up developing this, and pretty quickly it evolved. I had
Mhm.
all these babies showing up, and it was really fascinating. And you're right, there was these birthing programs, and it made sense to me that trained in hypnobirthing. And I was, working with that. If this is effective, then for fertility, right? Why not? Let's
Yeah.
let's pursue this. So this evolved, and the spirit baby aspect of it started to take more of the forefront. Become
Hmm.
more of the focus. About 2016, these babies basically, I was working with spirit babies in general. I wasn't tuned in particularly. It didn't matter what spirit babies they were, because you've heard of indigo children, rainbows, and crystals,
Yes.
and so forth. And it didn't matter. It was the spirit baby or the energetic baby, the babies in the ethereal realm, if you will, that I was working with. And they just weren't attached. And then about 2016.
But before you move on, just to clarify for listeners who haven't heard about this,
Oh, sure.
what Lindsay's referring to is working with those babies in the spirit world to come through their mothers and to be born.
Exactly. When we have that sense or that knowing that there's a baby there, and that's because we're connected. I mean, we don't only exist in the physical world. We sometimes think so because we are in the physical world and we are in these bodies, and we deal with, limitations or experiences that are related to that. But we also exist on many levels, and we're connected energetically to beings, including our babies. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so about 2016, these babies decided that they wanted to let me know they had a name, they had their own unique purpose, and they wanted me to get that out there. This is when they downloaded me, or started downloading a book to me to
Mm-hmm.
talk more about them. So my first book was basically to let people know that hypnosis was an option for fertility, because so many people didn't know that, and it is so effective and helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted people to know there was another option. There's very limited options for people to use for fertility. You look at weight loss, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a million different things you can do.
It's true.
Yeah. And with fertility, there wasn't a lot. So finding out how effective hypnosis was, I wanted to let people know that. The next book evolved into the spiritual aspect and much more emphasis on divine feminine.
Mm-hmm.
So when the Pink Starlight showed up, they wanted me to get their specific purpose out there. At first, I didn't know what their name was, but I knew they said they were a different species, we're a different cohort, we're different
Mm-hmm.
from other spirit babies. And then they did give me their name, Pink Starlights. And that basically came from, pink, the unconditional love, right? In the heart
Mm-hmm.
chakra, and bringing that type of energy through. And then also Starlight being such a brilliance, so really high levels of light.
Mm-hmm.
And then they told me, they gave me this title for their book, Waiting in the Wings, Introducing the Pink Starlight. So it was you've got to get out there and you've got to let people know about us and our purpose.
Fantastic. Yes. So what is their purpose?
So their purpose, and every baby that comes through, of course, is important and wonderful and filled with love. I mean, babies are love.
Yes.
These guys, the indigos came through to really start breaking down, the way things have been, the out of balance patriarchy, kind of level the playing field, if you will, just knock things down so that we can bring through this higher level of energy that we desperately need. Earth energy is rather dense, and there's such a healing going on with the planet that really needs to be happening. And I think everybody's pretty much aware of that things are out of balance, that we've been not very kind to Mother Earth, as a species. Not all of us, but overall, we take a lot, and, we don't put back, and we just tend to, overdo. And then I call the focus kind of the god of greed. People, there's so much about, what can I get? How much can I get? Even hoarding that goes on with resources at this point in time. There's no reason anybody on the planet should be going hungry. There just isn't. And yet this is going on,
Yes. Yeah.
And so this has been part of that purpose of these babies coming through and helping to lighten the energy. And I mean, all of them, all of, the indigos and so forth. And then these babies, they are supreme healers, and they're bringing in really high levels of light to help with the planetary transformation that needs to happen. We are ideally transcending what we have been experiencing and even creating to some extent. We're transcending that now, and we need some help. And these babies, I say they come in to be the people, and they are. All of us are the people, of course, but they're coming in to hold positions in the world from a place of open-mindedness, of compassion, of awareness,
Yeah.
And because things are accelerating right now. I talk a lot about this balance of divine feminine, sacred masculine, and they're very much about that, as well as above, so below, bringing through ethereal realm and connecting it in balance with the earth realm. So in Native American philosophies, you'll hear Father Sky, Mother Earth, the cosmos and the earth, or our planet, very focused on that balance of divine feminine and sacred masculine, which really has led to the imbalance, has led to issues with fertility, among other things.
How so?
Oh my gosh, it's so amazing. There's like so many things to go into. So I'll try to pause every so often so you can ask questions.
I loved the book. The book went into all these different areas. And so I do want to give the readers a sense of the book, but absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot packed into it.
Yeah, there really, really is. We've seen a lot of shifts and changes happening in the world. There's a lot of fear going on. There's a lot of division that's happening. There's a fear to shift and change. We're always afraid of change, right? Most people do not like change. Change is really the one constant in the entire universe, but we're not all that, usually receptive to it. And so it doesn't matter because it's changing with or without us. Okay. So they're bringing this energy through. And what's happening right now is it's bottlenecking, because they are bringing such high levels of light through, and now it's coming in rapidly, and the energy of spirit is higher, is faster. And so at this point it's bottlenecking. And so that's part of the reason they want me to get out there and be letting people know about them and helping people to shift their alignment. So we're out of alignment.
Okay. Clearly we're out of alignment.
Yeah, we are clearly out of alignment. And so what you'll see happening is this out of balance, or patriarchy that's out of balance. And this it's not about man, woman. It's about masculine, feminine. So each of us has the masculine and feminine energies, and they should be balanced, but they're not. When you see the out of balance masculine, you see aggression, you see volatility, you see oppression, you see war, you see, on a big scale, you see control, things like that. We're going to control everyone. You see this greed. Now, divine feminine or feminine on, an imbalanced feminine is taking, a lot of times you'll see healers, and then the healers are not taking care of themselves. So they're over giving. They're putting everything and everyone else ahead of themselves, but it's really off balance. That depletes our energies. Now, to get on in this world, we do need to pull a lot of masculine energy in. And the fertility world is very masculine. Western medicine is very masculine.
Yes.
When you're in the fertility world, there's this time crunch. There's this sense of desperation in a lot of cases. There's a push. Sometimes people they go into the doctor just to get a clean slate. Like, okay, we checked you out. You're good. Go ahead and get pregnant. And instead, there are issues, right? And even if it's the tiniest issue, but then there's a sense of almost panic about it because there's such an intensity about it. You've got to do this. You've got to do that. We jump to donor eggs, for example, really quickly, and people don't get a chance to process. And people often feel, women often feel that they have to make a decision. They have to make it rapidly, and it may not be the best thing for them. So these are going to be the out of balance masculine issues. Okay. And then we do need the feminine, the nurturing, protective. And we're looking at this at an archetypal level, right? So we have archetypes. We know what those mean, universal experiences or universal types. We know what a warrior is, right? We know what a mother is or mother should be. We know what a goddess is. That's a universal understanding. We know those things. And when those get out of whack again, it's so interesting because there's sides to each one of them. So people tend to think mother is loving, mother is protective, mother is caring. No matter what else happens, mother loves you. And that's not always the case. There's definitely shadow mother, right?
Yeah, there's shadow mother, but there's also warrior mother who will stand up for her children in a different way, let's say, than like the nurturing, soft kind of mother.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the issues with the shadow mother or the negative mother, or, you hear about in the animal world, mothers that eat their children. And this can happen very much. So that's going to be the unbalance. So warrior mother is still in balance. And then shadow mother is out of balance. And can be very dangerous, can be very harmful, can drain people's energies. A lot of times you'll see something like someone has a mother who was 18 years old and just dropped everything on them. And they had to handle things, parent the parents, raise the other siblings, whatever the case was, deal with, mothers undealt with stuff, right?
Yeah.
Out of balance, feminine, it could be all sorts of different things, but we tend to think of mother as good and kind and all of that, accepting, they'll always embrace you. And that's not always the case. And this can actually cause a lot of damage for people, especially, when others, they'll say things like, well, it's your mother.
For sure. For sure. I mean, I work a lot with grown-up children of narcissistic parents and narcissistic mothers in particular. And it's quite damaging, really is. It's a whole different way of moving through the world and working towards healing.
Oh, absolutely. And people do a lot of damage by saying things like, that's your mother, or, kind of get over it type of thing.
It's one of the top frustrations that they feel so alone. And my mother was a narcissistic mother, so I know that very well, to where, for example, when I met my ex-husband, who was Cuban, he could not imagine, like he really could not conceive that less contact with my mother was better for me. He really just had no concept. And it's almost like there's only certain people they can even talk to about it, because the immediate reaction of most people is, well, that's your mother and you should love her. And,
Right.
of course she loves you. And, all this stuff that gets
Right.
very complex when you have, let's say, a shadow mother that we were raised by a mother in their shadow side or abandoned by them.
Right. And I definitely have that same background with the mother. And then my mother has the background of being completely unwanted, neglected, and, that stuff carries through.
It does. Yeah.
But you can't love that out of somebody, and you have to take care of yourself. And
Yes.
that's where we can get into unbalanced feminine again with, well, you have to accept anything and everything. This unconditional love is actually, again, that can be dangerous in terms of if someone is really a threat to you, and that can be your father, your mother, it can be anyone.
Mhm.
It's interesting as babies talk about bringing unconditional love, but not in a sense that's damaging or toxic to people, but bringing through a higher level of love so that we can all have a recognition of that, and to help with things like this, narcissism, borderline personality, all of these that we develop because of just the way the world is and the energy of the world is right now. Abuse and neglect causes all of these things. And it's like we continue to perpetuate that abuse and neglect.
Yes. Until someone gains the awareness of their own journey of healing, they will perpetuate it. Absolutely.
Exactly. And so the babies, the pink starlight, so the ones that I work with, so my clients tend to have had quite a struggle with
Mhm.
their fertility, and they may have been through 9 rounds of IVF by the time I see them. They may have been trying to conceive for years and years and years, and sometimes starting in their 20s and now they're 40. And, there's nothing is cut and dry. Just because somebody's in their 20s doesn't mean they're going to easily conceive. People may have been through multiple miscarriages or
Mhm.
had to had a number of surgeries, things like that can be happening. Okay. And I call that, I've learned from the babies and in my own experience, that this is an initiation. And the pink starlight parents tend to go through an initiation.
Mhm.
They need to grow. They need to do their own work. We cannot, narcissistic mothers are not getting pink starlights. Pink starlights have work to do. Most of us, that indigo connection, those of us, and I'm sure you probably have that indigo connection, as I discovered at some point that I do, that came into that kind of situation. And that situation was important because we had to get tough. We had to be able to go against just the way things were for the longest time. We had to break down institutions
Mhm.
and break down, this mass control of people that we've had, right? And
Yes.
so the pink starlights, on the other hand, they're here to help with the shifting of that at a rapid pace, so they don't have time to deal with mother not having done her work. And doesn't mean, we're never finished. We're always doing our work, but
Mhm.
that has to at least be rolling. And now someone could be spiritual or they can be on a healing path, but they still may need to experience more. And infertility, which I hate the word, but that issue is so devastating. It does cause us to open up and look. So maybe someone's done acupuncture in the past,
Mm.
but there may be more things they need to look into. And it may be, they may need to learn about being an empath. They
Mhm.
may need to learn more to trust their intuition. They may need to take healing courses. They may need to have Reiki treatment. There's all sorts of things they may need that the babies need ahead of time. And so
Yes.
when someone's struggling to get pregnant, they'll tend to investigate this type
Mhm.
of thing. And so that's the initiation. It's amazing. Initiations are not easy. They're
Mhm.
not fun. They're not supposed to be.
Yeah. But I
Right?
I love the point you made in your book about this. I related so much for this. I had never heard of pink starlights before. And my immediate thought was that this is my second child, actually, who's 17 now. So I don't know if the timings worked out. That was my initial, like, I got a full body rush actually when I was reading about it. And I was like, oh my God, that's who she is. but I had 3 miscarriages in between my first and my second, and went investigating, absolutely, and tried all kinds of stuff, and then tried to like give up. And you make that point somewhere in your book that you can't like try to give up, like it has to be genuine. But of course I'm reading about all this stuff and I'm like, oh, if I just give up, I'll get the baby, right? Like, but you can't do it. You can't do it, quote unquote. The do and the quotes, it really has to be genuine.
Absolutely.
And so I reached that point and gave away all my baby stuff, all my cloth diapers that were beloved to me, and all of I think I gave away the crib and everything. I gave away everything, and then ended up in acupuncture and emailing some researcher who was across the world about the MTF-HR gene. And that's how she came to be, is sort of the combination of those two. But absolutely, it was an initiation. It was so difficult, and mothers go through so much. And I didn't even go through what a lot of moms go through trying to get pregnant with even the first one.
Right.
And also wanting more. And some of the emotional flack they even receive for that, like, isn't one enough, that type of thing. So yeah, I really related to that reframe of that. Wow, it is an initiation, and it requires such incredible, deep emotional growth.
Truly, truly. And women, we can be so hard on ourselves, and women tend to berate themselves, blame themselves, even when it's 100% male factor infertility. Women will still take charge. They'll still feel responsible. They do all of the research, and so often, assuming there is a male partner, the male partner kind of does what she tells him to do. Like, she researches acupuncture and then says, okay, I'm going to do this, and this is what we need you to do. Here's some supplements. This is what you need to do. For the most part, that's what you'll see. And we're so hard on ourselves. And for the longest time, women will say to me, I feel like I'm broken. And we feel like we are, because it's something that we should be able to do. It's inherent. We should be able to have babies if we want to. And when we can't, it does lead to feelings of really being broken. It hits self-esteem really hard. And then there is that comparison, like you just said, I didn't go through what some people have gone through, but our own pain is our own pain. And I do talk about that. I have a chapter in the book about that.
Yes.
Yes, there's people starving, children may be starving, or something else is going on, and that seems worse. But our own pain is our own pain. It doesn't detract from someone else's, but we still have our own issues, and that's our initiation. And we come through to this world, and we have our own purposes and paths, and all of these things are connected. So maybe if we're concerned that people are starving, the pink starlights are concerned about this too. As we evolve, or as we learn, as we investigate, as we shift, then we are able to shift that energy on a much grander scale. And then this is going to help with all of these things. And we can do this to each other. And this is going to be women who are out of balance. They'll get very competitive in the fertility area. And they'll say things like, well, that person has only been trying for 8 years and I've been trying for 9. Or I had, 5 miscarriages and they only had 4. Or, I'm 41 and she's 40 and a half, so she shouldn't be complaining. And you'll see a lot of that. And just in this anger, in this grief, in this fear, we can tend to be that way. And then, the anger thing is on that masculine side. And we are not by any stretch encouraged to actually show our anger. And so if we're pushing that down, there's no space. We need a receptivity to have a baby. And, again, that's going to fit with the feminine. So my clients are doers. Most of my clients are achievers, overachievers, type A, and self, diagnosed or self-proclaimed. And they know it. and they
Yeah.
know it. And so it is that intention and surrender that you were talking about. I don't consider surrender to be giving up, but it is letting go. And you cannot fake
Yeah.
that.
Mhm.
And in life,
Right.
fake it till you make it works in a lot of cases, especially if
Mhm.
somebody feels that they're new at something and they don't feel good enough at it yet. But fake it till you make it, you will be there. But trying to let
Mhm.
go of wanting to be a parent or wanting to have a baby or a second baby or a third baby, that's not something that you can fake. So
Right.
what I
Yeah.
help people to do is take that doer energy because we want to do it. And people
Mhm.
who have that, especially that type of personality, you put your mind to something and you get it done. You want to go get this degree, you get it. You want this career, you get it. You do it. You put your mind to it, you make
Mhm.
it happen. And you can't force a baby. And I always say you can't left brain a baby. So left brain being more of your doer, right?
Yeah.
And right brain being your
Mhm.
creative side. Well, this is creation, creativity. We are creating a
Mhm.
baby. So balancing the things that we can do. You can go to acupuncture, you can do your hypnosis, you can decide on a clinic, you can, any of that. And then
Mhm.
receiving open and receptive, babies coming in the right time in the right way. We can't control that. This whole issue is, control comes into it. All the control that we think we have is an illusion. Okay. We really don't have control. We
Yes.
just think we
Yes.
do.
Agreed.
And when, yeah,
Agreed.
when it
Yes.
seems like we have control, it then reinforces this idea that we have control, which we don't necessarily. So I call it that hit by a bus tomorrow theory. If we're hit by a bus tomorrow, all of this is moot.
Yes.
And so it does help to be mindful and do the best we can to stay in the present. I mean, we need to plan certain things. Obviously, we live in a linear existence here on this planet. We have to have days and dates and times. And, I wouldn't know to meet you this morning to be on this, podcast if we didn't have a
Mhm.
date and a time. But in the spiritual realm or in the ethereal realm, we don't have that. We don't have those time constructs and space constructs. So it's really interesting how that is, where we want things to happen on our own schedule, but just because it isn't doesn't mean it's not happening, if that makes sense.
To me, it makes complete sense. Yes, that sometimes when it's not happening, that's not fitting into our linear time goals there.
Right.
Like I want the baby now, and then I want the second one 2 years later, and that type of thing. It doesn't fit in there, because there's the spiritual time that happens in its own time. I really love how you said too. It's like even when we think we're in control, sometimes we're usually not. Like there is a spiritual sense going on of when children show up for someone. And I think it's hard to convince someone of that who really did like plan their kids and everything went according to their quote unquote plan.
Right.
But when you've experienced something quite different, it really resonates. Like, nah, everything does not line up exactly how you're going to do it. And you cannot put it into a spreadsheet. And,
Right. Right. No, we try though.
Right. You can't project manage it.
No, exactly. And that book, Illusions by Richard Bach, which most people in the
Oh,
spiritual
yeah.
who've started a path like this have read, but definitely read that because it's so amazing. But we do have this illusion. We think that because we're alive right now, we will be alive 5 minutes from now. And likely we will be because we were alive 5 minutes ago and we were alive yesterday. But that doesn't mean we have any control over that. And I learned that when I was 20 years old. And my dad, who I was having a conversation with, suddenly died. In the midst of this
Wow.
conversation, had a massive coronary. And I think about the life that I had before I was 20 and then the life that I had when that happened, and this awareness.
Yeah.
So you see sometimes people who have made it to 45 or 50 years old and their grandparents are still alive and they've really never been through something like that. And
Mhm.
there's various things that happen to us in our lives to give us that awareness that, we don't have control. There was nothing I could do in that moment. I could not stop it. There
Yes.
was nothing that I could do. And that's when you really learn that control thing. I trained a Catholic priest a few years ago because I trained people to do the hypnofertility work. And he said, when he used to counsel people, they would say, Father, I want to have a baby, but if God wants me to have a baby, I will, or I know that, but I want a baby. And God's not giving me one. Or they'd say, I want one that's going to be born in September because that works with such and such time frame. And then I want 3 of them and I want them 2 years apart. But, God's will, whatever God's willing. And he said to them, we'd say this over and over, that is not thy will be done. That is my will be done.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's kind of like it's really eye-opening, right? It's like, oh my gosh, that's very true. And it's nice when those things work out the way we want, but they don't always. But it doesn't mean that they're not happening, that the babies aren't coming. Once they're here, I always say hindsight is 20/20, and with hypnosis, we do have the benefit of hindsight. So we can be forward in time, in the present, in the mind, and be able to experience this. But anyone that I've worked with on the other side has said, and I asked them, and they have said, yes, this is the right time. This is better. I'm glad this didn't happen at such and such a time. And, I had a client who, for example, had an IVF cycle fail, but within a few days, her father died. She had to travel, halfway across the world. This would not be a state to be in when you've just had an embryo transfer.
Yes.
To fly, a 20, 25-hour flight and then have to turn around and come back in a few days. And, the amount of stress and the amount that was involved in that. So no, we don't want to see the embryo transfer fail, but there's a reason sometimes. And how much better is that than to have the effect that could occur from something like that. And so I will see that and I will tell clients, we'll meet when you have that baby and you'll show me that baby. And when you do, you're going to get it. You get it at that point. And that's part of the surrender as well. But like I say, we can't fake it. But even getting mad at the universe, getting mad at God, saying the heck with it, with stronger language likely, and just being fed up or giving things away like you did, or, just going off and having some wine or doing something else. You can't fake it. You can't go, okay, universe, I don't care, but I do care. But I don't care, universe, because the universe knows.
Yes.
But getting fed up is okay.
What do you tell women who are feeling punished by God?
That's a good question. And it's an area that I go into, is the spiritual aspect. And we tend to go to being punished. Or you hear people, oh, I must have horrible karma, or I'm being punished, or God hates me, or universe hates me, or whatever, the terminology that they're comfortable with. And that's simply not so. Everyone is going through things in the world. Everyone goes through things in their lives, and we tend to drop to that. We must be being punished. And that's part of the dynamic that the pink starlights are trying to get rid of. To crash that, especially women. We take responsibility. We blame ourselves. We feel this, and we're set up that way. This is, organized religion for years and years, for centuries, for millennia, setting us up to be punished.
Yes.
And it's control. It's like, how do you control the masses? Well, let's set them up to be terrified.
Yes, that they're going to be punished.
Right, right. So that's an archetype too. That's in there.
True.
So part of that is confidence, and it hits people's confidence when you feel things aren't going your way, or when you're really hurt, when there's a lot of emotion involved, and these things trigger other things like fear and anger again, and feeling like you're in a fishbowl. Because a lot of people that I talk to, they go out with friends, but they don't want to go because they're not drinking because they're going through an IVF cycle, or they're trying to conceive naturally. And so they aren't going to have any alcohol, and they are sure that everyone's going to know it's because they're trying to get pregnant. Well, if I don't have wine, everyone's going to know, and everybody's going to ask, and I don't want everyone to know. That's where an obsession almost happens, or such a narrow focus, because I didn't drink at all for years. I just didn't. And people used to be like, well, why don't you have a glass of wine? No, thanks. Well, you should have wine. I don't like wine. I don't want wine. Whatever the case was, it had nothing to do with trying to conceive.
Mhm.
And I didn't think that it did. I didn't think that they thought that, right?
Mhm.
And you might be doing a cleanse. You might decide you need to lose a few pounds. Alcohol is terrible for weight.
Yeah.
And so can say, hey, I'm doing a cleanse, or I had a rough night last night. I don't feel like it, or I'm driving, or
Mhm.
whatever the case is. And it doesn't mean that people are instantaneously thinking that. So there's this focus, and it's a tough issue because there's so much insensitivity around it, and
There is,
so many
yeah.
people don't care. And I talk about this quite a bit. If someone gets a cancer diagnosis, stage 4 cancer or terminal diagnosis of some sort, or whatever, or a really serious illness, people tend to be supportive of that. Oh, I'm so sorry. What can I do? Can I help you?
Mhm.
Someone gets an infertility diagnosis, and people are saying things like, well, I guess God doesn't want you to have children, or, there's too many children in the world, or there's very dismissive of it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
ideally, you're not going to say to someone diagnosed with cancer, oh, well, I guess God doesn't want you to live, and just kind of dismiss
Totally,
that,
right.
right?
Yes. Yeah, right.
And the fertility issue is at that catastrophic level.
It is,
It
yeah.
it is, regardless of whether people are sympathetic to it. And usually what happens is people aren't familiar with it, and so they don't think much of it. I had a client that came in, and she was, close to 50,
Mhm.
and she hadn't been married. She and ended up meeting a partner late in life. And so she went in, they decided they want to have children. The doctor said, well, donor eggs is going to be your way to go. She said, okay, yep, that makes sense. I'm
Mhm.
48. I'm going to get a donor. That's the way I'll have my babies. That's that. And it failed. She got a donor, and everything came together, and then the transfer failed. And then she was absolutely devastated. And then she said to me when she came in, when I first met her, she said, I feel so bad because for years and years I dismissed anybody who was going through infertility. I thought they were overreacting. I thought it was no
Mhm.
big deal. And now I get it. Now I really get it. And so sometimes people are being insensitive mainly because they don't really understand it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even when I got into this work, I had people say to me, well, what are you doing that for? There's already too many people on the planet. And it's like, well, we need new people. Okay. We need new
The people
ones.
are not stopping. Yeah,
Right,
right.
right. And
Right.
I'm working with people who actually want their children, that, are
Yes.
going to love them, are going to
Mhm.
provide for them, going to make sure that they get educations if they want them, and, are going to be open-minded, are not going to be cruel and abusive, you know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah.
That's part of that pink starlight thing too. So they're bringing in a lot of healing energy, and we have to go through a lot in order to receive them. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you mentioned something that I wanted to speak to, which is of your 17-year-old being a pink starlight.
Mhm.
So this is another direction they're going. So I'm sure they plotted that, plant a little seed right in your head to mention that,
Mhm.
because there are pink starlights out there, but they didn't feel any need to be known as pink starlights.
Mm.
And so now part of what they have me doing too is speaking to people in that sense that, hey, I think I have a pink starlight. Or, and
Yeah.
it may be your child, it may be your grandchild, it may be that you're a teacher and you just see some of these,
Mhm.
and they're very apparent, they're very obvious in, they're so intelligent and
Mhm.
so intuitive and so knowledgeable. Sometimes they're a little frustrated because they have these little bodies, and they were just, prior to that, flying all around and seeing everything. But they do bring a lot through, and they do see a lot. And my little grandson is a pink starlight, and he's
Mhm.
6 months old, and we
Aw.
connected before he was born.
Cool.
My daughter-in-law miscarried, and it was interesting because I was connected with him, and I knew, I had a feeling that that was what was going to happen. It just seemed like things weren't tracking. But
Mhm.
even when you have a sense of that, you don't want to go there,
Oh,
you
no, totally. Like, "Hey, you're gonna
'cause
miscarry." Like, no, you
right,
never
right. And you
do
could be
that, never.
wrong. I
You
mean, it's
could,
my
absolutely.
grandchild, so I
Yes.
could have some kind of, fear about it or whatever that was. But
Yeah.
when that happened, I knew that he was coming back, and I knew that he was a
Mhm.
boy. when that first pregnancy happened, one of the things was I knew it was a boy, but I kept getting this switch, boy, girl, and I kept switching. It was driving me crazy. And I know that I have 2 grandchildren there from that son. I knew for other reasons that things weren't quite right, but I found that interesting just from observing that. And so when they got pregnant again, I knew it was my grandson, and then people were back to it being a girl. And it was really funny because I told them it's a boy. And I also, they came to my house. It was my birthday, but my birthday's in December, and they had COVID and everyone was sick. And so we were doing my birthday in February.
Oh, geez.
And I'm standing there talking to them, and all of a sudden I go, oh my gosh. I said, is so-and-so pregnant that I know that my daughter-in-law knows? And she kind of looks at me and her jaw sort of drops. And then she says, no. And then all of a sudden I follow this with, you're pregnant. Oh. And then her chin drops again. Then my son takes my birthday card and kind of tosses it to me. He says, happy birthday, Mom. And I open it up. There's from my son, my daughter-in-law, their dog, and your little Libra.
Oh my God.
Grandson.
I'm getting chills. Oh my gosh.
It was so funny. So then they say to me, well, this person that I mentioned was pregnant. Yes. Oh. But miscarried at 5 weeks. But how on earth did I know that? Like, it just came to me. And my son loves to be the skeptic, even though he was raised with all of this. And he was initiated. I initiated him into Reiki when he was 5, and I had him meditating when he was 3. And this is my 33-year-old. And so it was so funny. I told them it was a boy. So my other son, who is the spirit baby one, who's in my second book, and he's the one that came through as a spirit baby and sort of took control of my life, even though I wasn't supposed to have this second one. He shows up, and then all of that came together. But so he's usually really good at tuning in to spirit babies. When he used to live at home, when he was 15, 16 years old, and if he ever walked into the room where I had just spoken to a client, he would say something. He'd be like, oh, that's a boy, or, oh, that's twins, or, oh, that's a person with red hair, or things like that that he would do. Yeah. Cool. So he thought he was going with girl, and he was adamant. And my older son was like, well, we'll see, but
is there a betting pool going?
Right. So they do the blood test, but I already know that he's a boy. So they do this blood test, and then my grandson comes to me and he says, they did the blood work, but I'm a boy. And I'm like, yeah, I know. So I texted them because I want this in writing, right? Yeah. And sure enough, so my son has to call him. He calls me when they get and he's like, okay, Mom, you're right, it's a boy. I'm like, yeah, I know. And then both of my sons had to admit Mom was right. And you know how that goes, right?
I do. Yeah.
Mom's never right. What is Mom? And I'm like, it's kind of what I do, guys. Okay.
Yeah.
It is. It's kind of what I do. So, and it all just, and I knew, this is really funny with my grandson, I knew that he was going to be born with moon in Pisces at the 29th degree. Now, I don't know that much about astrology, but I do have a friend who's a great astrologer. And while we were waiting for this baby to be born, I could hear her in my head. Oh my gosh, he has his moon in Pisces at the 29th degree, because it's very powerful. I do know that much. And it does also match to, I have Chiron in my chart in Pisces. And I don't know, I didn't know anything about Chiron, but it was at 29 degrees. But anyway, I kept hearing this. And so when I did talk to her, I told her, and she said, at first I didn't know what you mean, but then I looked at what you meant, but I looked at your chart and his chart, and oh my gosh, you're absolutely right.
Very cool.
And so things like that will happen, right?
Yeah. Well, the other thought that kept occurring to me when I was reading this book was the rise in autism.
Right.
My 17-year-old she's autistic level 1, and which we call the artist formerly known as Asperger's. Right. But what kept occurring to me as I read the book is like these pink starlights. They're very intuitive. You say very intelligent, but they also are here to create harmony and need harmony. In my experience of autism and everything I know about it, I'm doing adult autism evaluations now. It's like harmony is so important for regulation. So it's not just like, oh, harmony is elective is nice. It's like, no, harmony is a must so that you stay self-regulated, so that the meltdowns don't happen, so that, this. And so I just kept thinking, like, is this part of these pink starlights coming to teach us this about the necessity of, working things out whenever possible, being in a harmonious environment? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that is really huge. Sometimes people, when they're struggling with fertility, they can end up with subconscious blocks, and that may be a fear of kids being born with, various issues. And that's not what that's about as far as that goes. But absolutely harmony, as above, so below, balance of both. I talk about balance a lot: balance of intention and surrender, balance of mind, body, spirit, balance of masculine and feminine. And bringing that through creates that harmony.
Yeah.
And we can be more in harmony, but we don't even know this. I mean, we're never taught, oh, yes, we're, internally masculine and feminine, that we have both of these energies. It has nothing to do with gender, has nothing to do with sexual preference, has nothing to do with that. We all have that internal masculine and feminine. So to have that awareness, and definitely to have that harmony, which people are on various spectrums of various issues, things that we didn't know about, like adult ADD.
Yes.
All of these types of things that we didn't know about, and therefore people weren't helped, and sometimes excessively medicated, and sometimes excessively punished. Back when I was a kid, they just punished them all.
Yeah. Evan's neurologist, who's ADD himself, and he's like in his, I'd say, early 50s, late 40s or something. He tells her this story one time. He's like, when I couldn't focus, my parents would just hit me. That's it, And he says it very funny. He's not like, he's like, they just whack you and say, pay attention. That's it,
Oh, no, it's true.
Yeah. He's like, we have other options now.
Exactly. And so see, the indigos, he's probably an indigo, but they're coming through to stop this, and I talked about that in the book too, about the whole hitting children, beating children. And then we go to this area of letting children run the show, which is not healthy. See, you had all this helicopter parent stuff going on.
Yeah, completely like not balanced.
Right. And literally going on job interviews with kids.
Oh my God. I'd not heard that one.
True. I mean, even adult kids.
I mean, I grew up in that generation. My 17-year-old still at home, my 21-year-old at college, about to graduate. I just have such compassion for mothers and myself in trying to find that balance of where do you advocate for a child and where do you help them and where do you back off and say, all right, that's for you to do. That's for you to learn. Like, you've got to figure out how to advocate for yourself, that type of thing. Even this morning in the car, Eva and I was driving her to school, and we were talking about a teacher that my oldest daughter had that ended up in some legal problems. She wouldn't let me email the school about him. Like, he's doing some really offensive things, nothing that was dangerous to her. But I was like, no teacher should be saying things like this. And she's like, no, you cannot email. And she wouldn't let me. So it's like, that's an example of like, like, what is that? Is that advocating? Is that helicoptering? All of that. Like, just where do you find that line? I think we all intuitively know that's out of balance. And we understand the instinct, the mother instinct to want to protect and help. Yeah.
Exactly. It is that natural mothering instinct, and it is balanced feminine there, because it's not balanced when you go there and self-arrest the teacher or something like that, or take them and lock them in your basement. But one of the big things too is what started happening in the pendulum swings, right? So kids were being punished and abused, and spare the rod, spoil the child, and anybody could hit you. You went into the convenience store, you did something, then the guy behind the counter could hit you, and the teachers are hitting you, and the principals are hitting you, and other people's parents are hitting you. Like, that was a thing for a very long time. But then it swung where the kids are being in charge, and kids, their brains are not developed to be in charge. You can't give them too many choices. They do need a bedtime. They do need structure, and discipline, in the sense of really of structure. Like, we need to have discipline. I needed to be here on time for this interview. That's discipline. That,
Yes.
it's not punishment. It's structure, and it is like, okay, you can't just not be there.
Right. It's
You can't
agreement.
just sort of
Yes.
do whatever you want whenever you want.
Hmm. I love how you brought up Bringing Up Baby, the French book.
Right.
So you
Yes.
talk about that as an example in your book. And I had read that book far after my kids were little. I wish I had had that book when my kids were little. It would have given me a
Me
little more
too.
balance. But I think that's a great example of a mothering that's in balance is I think the author's point in that book in terms of, all right, this French perspective of, yeah, children do need a bedtime and this, and, you do not need to be available to them 24/7. And, and snack is structured. It is not
Right.
eating and food all the time. I related to so many examples in that book of,
Yeah.
unstructured,
Oh my
unbalanced.
gosh. Yeah.
Yeah, on the other side. And then what that creates later. I think we're all entering mothering, pregnancy, birth with our best intentions in general.
Oh,
I
sure.
like to think that people are, right,
Oh,
accepting
yeah.
the shadow side mothers, but we are entering into that. And then as we go through it, so many things change our perspectives and what we plan to do and then what we end up doing. How do we navigate that? I mean, my work is more after pregnancy. So after
Mhm.
birth, guiding mothers. Certainly there was years I was a postpartum depression anxiety specialist, that type of thing, versus your work is clearly more before pregnancy, right? Helping that pregnancy. But it's such a hard thing to navigate motherhood these days. I think we all deserve the most compassion for it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm the one person that tells people it's okay, or at least in my clients' world, where they're like, people are telling me I'm going to have to do this with a baby and I'm going to have to do that. And I can't do it. And I'm worried about it. And it's like, nope, you don't.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay. Tune in. I do work with women mostly. A lot of it is pre-pregnancy for sure. But I do go all the way through postpartum in
Mhm.
terms of, it doesn't just end with a positive pregnancy test.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I imagine they're super attached to you as well. Maybe that's just
It's
me. I'm attached to you. I mean, I can't imagine you go through
yeah.
work and growth and exploration and hypnosis to be
Mhm.
pregnant. You don't immediately drop your therapist. Right?
Well, no, because, also if people have had miscarriages, they especially need to get past that mark, whether it was 7
Yes.
weeks, 10 weeks, 20 weeks, whatnot. And
Yes.
then there's a lot of nervousness around being pregnant. Plus, if somebody's been going through fertility treatment, that is a full-time job. And
Yes.
there's appointments and there's medications and there's this and there's that and the other. And then all of a sudden they graduate from the fertility clinic and now there's nothing to do. Just wait. And that's really stressful too, because all of a sudden it's like, what could I be doing? What should I be doing? And, there's lots of concerns and, trying to get past milestones that is just so important.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's just so much that goes on there. And the pink starlights are, I don't even know how to say this, like they're contributing to helping the healing of all of this. But ultimately, the more we heal and the more we explore and the more we listen to podcasts like this and the more we understand things, the better for the entire world. And again, with the pendulum swinging, we don't need a matriarchy because that'll end up out of balance. Okay,
Yeah.
we
Mhm.
need a balance. We need that divine feminine, sacred masculine, and that's the version we want. We don't want the negative versions. With early in my
True.
life, I didn't even like women because I was exposed to the worst of them.
Mm.
That really my mother screaming constantly, like just all the time, just losing it. And her family, the aunts and whatnot. And then I think when you're exposed to that, you'd also draw that to you. And so I would see that and I was like, oh my gosh. Of course, your middle school girls are just a nightmare in
Yeah.
themselves in so
Yes.
many cases. To me, it was like, okay, the boys, they would get in a fight and then it'd be over with. And, whatever the case was, it didn't go on and on and on and on and on.
Mhm.
And so it was part of my journey to see that balance and to not turn into that, and then to help others. So I even say that part of my work is to model that balance of masculine and feminine, that we need both. And we need to run businesses that way. People get on the corporate ladder, or they get their own business, and then they run it with the masculine out of balance. So working 24/7, not, taking emails at any minute, any hour. You're in the middle of a conversation, ding, oh, let me look, and then off we go, right? That's going to be out of balance. And we need to have that self-care part. And you see it in the fertility clinics where it's like a revolving door. There's so many patients and nobody ever says, no, we can't take somebody.
Yeah.
And in my practice, I will only take a certain number of people. I absolutely want to know who they are.
Absolutely, yes.
When I look in my schedule, or when I meet with them, I want to know who they are, and I want to be present for them. And that's, if we could navigate the world that way, that would be, that's just going to be so healing, and to see that on a grander scale.
Absolutely, it is. Well, I think that's a wonderful place to end our interview, since we are out of time. Thank you so much for your wisdom and your presence and being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. And it's just so awesome to get to talk about these things. And the Pink Starlights also, thank you and appreciate you.
Before we go, where can people find you?
Easiest to find me is my website, hypnofertility.com. If you're interested specifically in the Pink Starlights, they of course have their own domain name, which points to their own page, which is pinkstarlights.com.
Great. And can people buy the book on that website?
There is a link to a free ebook copy of The 3 Keys to Conception on the homepage. And then I think there's links to Amazon, which is the easiest. It's faster to buy things from Amazon these days, and you get your, Amazon Prime, and you have it practically before you press send.
That's true. That's true. Well, thank you again so much. And I hope that whoever needs to get connected with Lynsi will.
Thank you so much, dear. I really appreciate it.
I hope you truly enjoyed today's episode. Remember that you can get free hypnosis downloads over at my website, drlizhypnosis.com, DRLIZ hypnosis.com. I work all over the world doing hypnosis. So if you're interested in working with me, please schedule a free consultation over at my website, and we'll see what your goals are and if I can be of service to you in helping you reach them. Finally, if you liked today's episode, please subscribe to the podcast or tell a friend. That way, more and more people learn about the power of hypnosis. All right, everyone, have a wonderful week. Peace. This podcast is not mental health treatment, nor should it replace mental health treatment. If you need therapy or hypnotherapy, please seek treatment from a trained professional.